What is good? Chicago Clubhouse Network. Welcome to Easy Does It. I am Easy. Still waiting on our fine viewership. Gonna wait till we get one. Hey, we got one. All right, let's go. What is good? It's probably Frank the Tank. How you doing, Frank? Just guessing. Just guessing. Anyway, let's see. I want to talk a little bit about the bye week because even though when we watch the bye week, we say to ourselves, oh, well, the Bears can't lose because, we're not playing. Well, the reality is the Bears kind of did lose a little bit this bye week because the Denver Broncos won, or no, not the Broncos. They didn't win. The Broncos lost, rather, to the Chiefs, 34-28. And in doing so, they moved the Seahawks into the second overall pick, which is not ideal. Definitely not ideal because now the Bears are hanging around at the number 3 pick, which is still good, right? Obviously, the top 3 pick is still going to be a really good player. However, it decreases their chances of being able to trade back, which is kind of what a lot of Bears fans and a lot of, the speculation about the Bears front office is that that's what they were going to do, is trade back. Now, with that being said, there's still plenty of, don't worry, Bears fans, there are still plenty of opportunities to lose this year. We have, 2 upcoming games against, I would say the 2 Super Bowl favorites in the NFC and the AFC, starting with the Eagles coming into Chicago, and then following that up with the who do we got now? Oh yeah, the Buffalo Bills. Yeah, that'll be fun. Josh Allen comes to town. That should be great. Honestly, at this point, after losing to Green Bay, I'm at the point where, do I want to win? Sure. But, I know what the long-term benefits and drawbacks are of winning and losing. So, I'm kind of very much on the fence about it. But for the most part, I'm kind of leaning towards, honestly, yeah, I'd rather lose. I think at this point, that long-term losing is better in the long run for where we're at. And the guest for the show that I have is a good friend of mine. We go way back. We went to summer camp together, and now we're just really good friends. He played football in high school. He was a guard, nose guard, and offensive guard. Probably a little short to play it at the NFL level or the college level, but still student of the game, high school coach. He breathes football. It's a huge part of his life, and he's definitely got experience in regard to understanding the value of losing games late in seasons and how it could pay off for the future. Because the person that we're interviewing is an Eagles fan, and the Eagles definitely have experience in that regard. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Washington game from 2020, I'm sure, which ended up being very beneficial for the Eagles. But yeah, so we're crossing over into enemy lines for this episode because we play the Eagles this week. But there are a lot of Bears fans who will be rooting for the same result as our guest, who is Noah Gross. So with that, I'm going to admit my friend Noah Gross. Welcome to the stream, Noah. Woo!
Thank you for having me, boss. Appreciate you. Great intro.
Thank you. Yeah, so Noah, first of all, I like that Eagles hat. That's kind of cool. That's a good.
Thank you.
Secondly, I was thinking about it, and the Eagles, y'all have some cool ass helmets.
Yeah, they do. It's one of the more simplistic but nicer uniforms. I know for years fans have clamored for the throwback 80s uniform to come back, but I really I love the forest green. The new black helmets I think are great too. I really like guard design. I didn't love the change this year to the new block lettering in the E, but it is what it is.
Sure. Yeah, and I think I do agree with you on that. The lettering for Eagles was much cooler, and people underestimate the value of fonts, by the way. Fonting,
massively.
Very important, particularly in baseball, but that's neither here nor there. I do like how the Eagles helmets look like their heads are kind of flying when they run really fast.
That's right. And one of the things that I didn't love about the older uniforms that a lot of us want to go back to is the wings were a bit smaller, and it reminds me of the Greek god with the heels that have little tiny feathers. And I'm like, no, I want big feathers. We're big, scary eagles. I want big feathers.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're not like, if you wanted to be like little birds, you could have been like the Philadelphia Tweety Birds or something. But no, you're
Also,
the
fun
Eagles.
fact: I got to go to the game a couple weeks ago, and they had their actual eagle out front, and its name is Noah. So I thought that was a fun little.
That is really cool because
Yeah, it was
it's
great.
Noah's a relatively common name, but it's not a common name for an animal. It's kind of
No,
a
it's
two
not. And
term.
like the eagle, just like it's just sitting there, just it's an eagle sitting there, just Noah, and I go, I'm Noah, and I like eagle. That's
Yeah,
funny.
there you go. There you go. It's kind of it's too human of a name for a pet in general, but it probably the fact that the Eagles named the eagle after you, that's pretty cool, and that's a
That's
sign. That could be a sign for that maybe that means y'all are going to get where you want to go. So I
wouldn't
do
that be
want
nice?
to. So the Eagles obviously on the right track. We're going to talk. This is a Bears podcast,
Right.
so we're going to talk about the Bears first and foremost. And you're obviously well versed in the NFL. You don't need to like I know it very well because we talk football all the time. But I do want to go back to 2020 because I believe that was the year when the NFC East was the shittiest division in football.
Correct.
And I think the Washington football team ended up winning the division that year.
With Heineke, yeah.
Yeah, with Heineke. Oh, we have a comment. What's good? Yes, JF1 is QB1. You're absolutely right, Frank. No doubt about it. And I think Noah's on that. I think Noah agrees as well.
Undeniable. I mean, that's inarguable.
Yes. So we're definitely all on the same page there. But yeah, anyway, and we argued about this at the time because and I still kind of stand by like, if you're going to have a playoff spot, you're going to want to get a playoff spot. You want to beat your rival. However, late in the season, when we both knew like, okay, the Eagles are out, even if they win this game, it doesn't really matter for them. Doug Peterman got fired because he took Jalen Hurts out of the game and put in Nate Sudfeld, and that led to the Eagles losing that game. But because of that game, the Eagles, I guess, were able to get a better draft pick, and because of that, they were able to trade. And who did that trade turn into?
So that trade turned into they went back from 6 to 12 with Miami to acquire first and third, and I believe a second. And then they used that third to jump back up in front of the Giants at 11 with Dallas to get Devontae Smith. So they kept Devontae out of Giants by doing a deal with Dallas, which you don't love. But if it keeps Devontae Smith out of New York, you bet you do it every single time.
Yes, absolutely. And it's one of those things where, yeah, like of course you want to win in the moment, but then
and the one thing I do want to
when it's April, no one's complaining, right? No one's complaining when you're picking a really good receiver ahead of where you might not have been able to get so much talent.
Exactly. And looking back on it, there's a lot of people who will now say, "Oh, you could have stayed where you were and gotten Micah Parsons." At the time, I loved Micah. I've been on Micah train since day one. There were some who said, "You don't really know what he's going to be in the NFL. Can you spend a top 10 pick on a linebacker?" So I don't know if I subscribe to that. The one thing I do want to say, I don't know if I would blame the hand. So first of all, the handling of the Washington game was bad. Jalen shouldn't have started it. They should have sat him, started Sudfeld, said, "Oh, his knee flared up in practice." Get him through the week. I didn't like that decision. I wouldn't say it was the singular thing behind him getting fired. I think the relationship between coach, GM, and quarterback, all three of those are broken. You break two of those three, you can make it through. You break three of those three, it just wasn't sustainable. But I do think that game was, and sort of to your point about the Bears wanting to lose, right? The Eagles in the same position wanted to lose. But if you remember in that same season, a few weeks beforehand, they had a massive upset of the Saints on Sunday Night Football. I think that's what the Bears and Bears fans and the Bears internally are sort of hoping for. Yeah, you want to lose out and maximize your draft position, but you also want to get your young franchise QB a signature win. You want your young team to learn how to win in those big moments. So I don't think you necessarily want to lose completely out. Best case scenario is you get one or two kind of cheeky wins, and you're still in position to take a very good player.
Absolutely. And, we got some people trickling in here, which is nice. And yeah, I think that the New England win, it wasn't a signature win for our quarterback, but it was definitely I think that could qualify as a signature win for your team going into New England, beating a defense that is known for, beating Belichick, right? Like, and keeping him from getting the win that would have put him over George Halas all time. It's kind of cool.
Right.
But with that being said, at this point, yeah, I'm rooting for more losses at this point, just because, I mean, Jalen Carter. Have you seen Jalen Carter?
Yeah, no, yeah, of course.
Come on. You know who he reminds me of a little bit? And you're going to call me crazy, but Warren Sapp.
I don't hate that comparison. The big comp frame is Quinton Williams, right? That's the one everyone's sort of making.
Right. And you say he's a little more lean than Quinton.
Right. I see. So my rationale for that is Quinton Williams plays at around 300, 305, but he is someone almost like a UFC fighter. He's naturally sort of a weight class up, but he sheds that 15, 20 pounds to maximize his ability. To me, Jalen Carter is more of like a DeForest Buckner, who is he's kind of a more naturally, probably naturally more of a 290, 295, but he adds every sort of ounce of muscle he can to his frame. I see him as more of a pass rushing interior guy, as opposed to Quinton Williams, who he is obviously a great pass rusher, but he also plays that 3-4 end space eating gap filler to a degree.
Right. And I think that's kind of why I would love to see this. I've heard that Washington isn't going to pay Daron Payne. A combination up front of Payne and Quinton
would be a monster. I think he's one of the most underrated players.
And Jalen Carter. Yeah. Oh wait, and can you say that again, real quick? Sorry.
I think Daron Payne's one of the most underrated players, not defensive linemen, players in the NFL.
Right, and defensive linemen are often just underrated by nature of the position,
particularly when they have such a stacked line, like with guys that are multiple first-round picks, and they get the attention, and Montez Sweat and Chase Young. I get why he doesn't get the attention that he does, but he's one of the more underrated players in the NFL, in my opinion.
I tend to agree with that, and I also think that it's one of those things where remember when the Rams first made it to the Super Bowl, they had Ndamukong Suh in the middle. And they also had Aaron Donald. I'm not saying obviously either of those guys are like Aaron Donald.
No,
but the two of them together, they might kind of like equal that level of talent as like an older Suh and Donald. Like these two very much could be stars. I think Jalen Carter, I don't think he'll be Aaron Donald, but I do think he will be, a really, really good player. And that's why I'm hoping that the Bears really make it a priority to emphasize that interior defensive line.
As sort of
and Frank, we'll get to your questions in a minute, but sorry, go ahead, Noah.
Sure, no. As sort of a barometer is, just how good is Jalen Carter? Think about how much think of the value the NFL puts on edge rushers. Think about how much hype Will Anderson is getting as an edge rusher. Then take into account that there is a genuine debate whether the pick should be Carter or Anderson. That alone should tell you how good Carter has the potential to be. Personally, I think we've talked about this multiple times. I think the NFL is starting to move a bit more away from external pressure from the edges, and they're moving towards prioritizing internal pressure. You look at the Eagles' defensive line this year. Yeah, they do have some great edges, but they go 6 deep on the interior defensive line, and a lot of the pressure, that's where it initially comes from when you watch the Eagles.
Oh, absolutely. And that's kind of like, it's something that I noticed Mike Zimmer kind of picking up on, especially in Kirk Cousins' lone playoff win against the Saints a few years back. They finally realized, you know what? Like, let's just put our best edge rushers on the guards and have them attack Drew Brees up the middle. Brees was befuddled. And I think that, the fastest way to get somewhere is in a straight line.
Right.
It's nice to have your Robert Quinn around the edge.
It makes sense.
Yeah,
if you
absolutely.
think about it, everyone for years said, what's the one way to beat Tom Brady? Internal pressure in his face. If that's the way to make, in my personal opinion, the greatest player in NFL history and greatest quarterback, if that's the way to make him uncomfortable, that's sort of a good baseline of, well, how do I want to make quarterbacks uncomfortable? Well, if it works against this guy who's the best, I'm going to try to do it this way. That makes sense to my brain.
It makes sense. I think it makes sense to, well-versed football brains in general. But, as we're talking about, getting pressure on the quarterback, who has not faced a great deal of pressure this season? I mean, certainly media pressure and whatnot, but someone who's been very comfortable all year and has kind of, I think it's safe to say that he's surpassed your expectations, is Jalen Hurts. Sure. And, he's been just awesome to watch, so much fun. And Frank wants to know, he's asking you, compare what you see in Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields in terms of Fields in the future and Hurts right now. And in addition to that, just talk about, what you've seen from Hurts this season in general.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think so. There's certainly aspects where Fields can be just as good, if not better, than Jalen. I think there are some people who, as of right now, would say Justin is a better runner than Jalen. I think the difference between the two, I think also Justin's up. I think maybe people underestimate how big he is. I remember we had this discussion earlier. He's
Yeah,
a solid 25, 30 pounds heavier
he's a thick
than
boy.
Hurts.
He's a
He's
thick
big.
boy.
He's like Cam Newton level thickness, but he's running faster. I think Hurts is more efficient in his running. It's almost Pat Mahomes-esque, where there's never any wasted movement when he runs. He gets down and needs to. When I watch Justin, there's a lot of east and west to get 8 yards, where I go north and south and get 4 and 5. There's a lot of times where I go, you could have slid and not gotten an extra 2 yards and gotten hit on the sideline. I do think that the big question coming into the season for Hurts was, can he get it done in the pocket, which it undeniably has this year. That point's inarguable now. I don't have as much faith in Justin doing that because I don't know if he has the accuracy to be that kind of passer long term. And when you look at a lot of his success on throws this year, a lot of those throws have been when he's moving, they have been off of play action, or a lot of his success comes off of broken plays. That's sort of one of my more underrated concerns about him, but I think he absolutely has the potential to be a top 10 quarterback. And bluntly, he's shown it this year. If he can reach his peak, I'm not saying he's going to reach his absolute peak, but based on what we've seen from the 14 or so games from Justin Fields this year, if he reaches his peak, there's no reason to think he can't have a Jalen-esque year with Jalen-esque weapons, which I'm not saying Darnell Mooney and Chase Claypool and potentially another draft pick or free agent would be that type of guy, but you certainly couldn't complain about that type of score, and you couldn't be shocked by similar production.
No, absolutely, absolutely, and I do think one thing Justin has surprised me with this year is I think he's gotten a lot better with touch. I've noticed,
Right.
He does have a good bit of accuracy, especially on the run. But his main thing is still, just like situational football, realizing when it's okay to check it down and, when it's okay to, like when it's usually not a bad idea to dump it off to David Montgomery and let him do some of the work for you. And I'm just hoping, Justin gets a little Jalen Justin. It's hard to say when talking about them both, but I'm really hoping Justin does get better at just figuring out you're not gonna win if you're always trying to be Batman. Sometimes
And
you
I
got to
think
be
he
Robin.
will, and one of my big criticisms of Jalen was he missed the easy throws. He missed the 1st and 10 8-yard out route with the cornerback giving 10 yards of cushion, and you hit that quick out and you're on 2nd and 2 instead of 2nd and 8. He was missing the quicks when it's cover 2 and you're quickly hitting the flat to pick up 4 or 5 yards of first down. He was consistently missing those throws. Then he started making, and then everything builds from there. Then he started making those throws. Then the deep ball started getting better, and you get incrementally better, and you build upon the success. Same thing with Justin. Every once in a while, he will rocket a ball in on a 4-yard pass, and you go, you didn't need to do that. Or, things like that. Or he bounces the ball in front of a guy, and you go, you got to have that one. Those type of throws, I think, will be massive for his development.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think, I also think that one thing I will add is, and this is obviously not a knock on Jalen Hurts, but he is one area in which he's lucky is that Eagles have a hell of an offensive line.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about that, as a lineman who loves the Eagles? I'm sure it's one of your favorite things to talk about.
Oh, no, I could talk all day about that. It's definitely one of the bigger privileges that you can have as a young quarterback. We all talk about getting them something to throw to, but, that's great. Doesn't matter if you give them, Terrell Owens and Randy Moss in their primes. If they can't stand upright and throw on platform, then it doesn't really matter who you have out there. So the ability to have an all-pro right tackle, a Hall of Fame center, someone who is turning into an all-pro left tackle in Jordan Mailata, a top 10 guard in Dickerson, a rock-solid guy in Sayamalo, the depth they have there. For those who are unaware, Jeff Stoutland is their offensive line coach, and he is known as one of the greatest line coaches ever to know. He's a phenomenal coach. If you are like me and you can just obsess over the line, just Google his interviews, YouTube them. He's a phenomenal coach. And you can tell the Eagles also, there's a brotherhood there, and there's a bond between them, where it's also a benefit of playing together. I think a really good example for the Bears is Tevin Jenkins. Came in as a very high draft pick. Yeah. I was ecstatic about that draft pick for them. I was like, I thought he was a top 20 pick. Back issues. They're always hard. You never really know how it's going to go. They'll get someone like Caleb Farley in Tennessee. They haven't quite figured that out. I think Tevin Jenkins has played pretty good football this year.
Oh, absolutely. He's a mauler. He's an absolute mauler. He finishes every play. You'd love him.
Right. And you can tell he's sort of settled in now. There were a lot of questions about where he would play coming out, which is often the case with college offensive linemen. Which, it's a big leap to the pros when it comes to both strength, agility, athleticism. It's a big, big jump. And some guys just don't really fit where you thought originally they would. They flopped in left tackle, right tackle. He's now found a home, I believe, at right guard. And so you can see he really is getting better and better. I'm a big James Daniels fan. I like what they have there. They got
James Daniels is he's on the Steelers now.
Oh, not James Daniels. I'm sorry.
Whitehair.
Larry Borum, the tackle from Missouri.
Right. Oh yeah, Mizzou.
That's what I was thinking. So I got them flipping my head. I loved Larry Borum coming out. I thought he played really rock solid as a rookie too. So the pieces are there, and I think they understand. Hey, we have a quarterback who is going to be running a lot, and B, we're going to be asking a lot of. We have to get guys to help keep them clean. They've got an unbelievable amount of cap space. I think a lot of Bears fans assume that cap space is going to prioritize running back, receiver, tight end, a skill position. I would not be surprised if the jewel of their class ends up being a lineman, or if they have almost a Jaguars-like offseason where they invest heavily into the interior of the offensive line.
Right. Well, I will say for the Bears, the one thing the Bears seem to have right is that interior offensive line. Cody Whitehair is pretty good.
Right, Whitehair, yeah.
Whitehair's solid, and Jenkins seems to be a mauler. Sam Mustipher, center, improved this year, but not a very good center in general.
And the Eagles are very lucky to have Jason Kelce there, and I think that having someone like Kelce to run the whole line is big, especially when you have a guy who's going to be running around a lot the way Justin's going to be. It's tough. Anyone who has played offensive line with a mobile quarterback or has been a fan of it in any capacity knows it's tough to why am I suddenly holding? Oh, because my quarterback rolled out of the pocket in a play that wasn't designed to be a rollout. Now I'm holding. There's just so much more that goes into dealing with a mobile quarterback that is a benefit, but as an offensive lineman, it's kind of a bit more difficult. So I think moves for good, not great. I think getting someone who like a good athlete in there to sort of run the center would make a lot of sense for them.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And also, by the way, Jason Kelce is set to hit the open market this free agency. And I'm just saying, Bears have a ton of money.
For some reason.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why he'd want to go to Chicago, but hey,
Peters did it.
There is a reason. It's called the Bears have so much money.
Right.
Like they have too much money. Like they could overpay Kelce and still have too much money.
Right, and that's the thing. When you have this much money going into an offseason, you can kind of spend it. Well, someone will call it an overpay and overspend. You go, yeah, but it's okay because I'm not really paying my quarterback for a couple of years. I'm not really paying my receiver for a couple of years. They're going to have to figure out a Claypool contract, obviously. But there's no one on the roster that you go, oh, on the roster currently that you go, oh, in the next 2 years, they're going to cost us a lot of cap space. Not really. All the best players are on the rookie deals right now.
It's kind of a blank slate, like there's really not a lot of talent there. I do think, paying Montgomery in a front-loaded contract would be a wise move for a running back who's shown pretty impressive durability, even when he has had, his knee injuries here and there. Like they haven't been those.
He's effective. He's effective.
Yeah. And it's not like, like he's shown, a good bit of durability, a good bit of, being able to play running back in a variety of schemes. He could be the outside zone, inside zone kind of guy. He's just really quality player. I don't see the issue with paying him. But that again, I understand that running backs nowadays are, a dime a dozen.
And also a big thing to remember, they've more or less got their secondary all figured out on rookie contracts. Not entirely, but they've more or less got that done. That's a massive luxury.
Apart from Eddie Jackson, who's making money, then yes, you're right.
Right. Everyone even that by now safety contracts from a couple of years ago, it's not horrible money at this point. And you've got 3 rookie deals in the secondary. That's a lot of money you're saving on not paying top tier money. Or maybe they decide to go out and pay a top tier corner and try to really, lock things down and try to, and something along those lines. If they want to do that, they'll to pay, $20 million for a corner, or maybe let's say sign Jesse Bates for an $18 million deal, which might be an overpay. Well, yeah, but now look at that secondary. They're going to have the ability to make those moves where they want to make them. I think linebacker is probably going to be let's call it as it is. They're gonna need to invest in an off-ball linebacker now. I
Oh,
understood
for sure.
the decision to trade Roquan, and I agreed with it. But I don't see an inside linebacker on the Bears roster right now that I go, oh, I'm confident in their ability to be a starter, going forward, or be not a franchise linebacker per se.
No, it's
but
interesting you
someone
bring that
will
up.
play at that level.
It's interesting you bring that up because there's an internal debate amongst a lot of Bears fans about Jack Sanborn and,
Yeah.
quality player, right? And we talked about
No,
it before
I've seen a bit of him. Right. Obviously, I'm not as well versed. But, I remember hearing, oh, he's Jack Sanborn, and so I watch him. He's a lot of fun. He's a good player. But again, I think that it's one of those things where the Bears particularly have a history of having that lockdown guy in the middle, sort of that everyone sort of plays off of. And I think that I would be very surprised if they don't get someone like that this year.
And you know who I really do kind of have my eye on, partially because if you're drunk enough, he looks like Urlacher, and partially because, I mean, he's just a good linebacker who's much younger than I thought. And partially because there's no way the Cowboys are going to pay him after the Jalen Smith debacle. Leighton Vander Esch.
Vander Esch, yeah. And, he had the neck injuries early on. I think he's a phenomenal player. He's one of the more underrated Cowboys, in my opinion. I think they've got a couple of really good players down there. I love Leighton. I think even though he hasn't looked great as a pro, I think Devin Bush would make a lot of sense for them.
For the Bears or for
I think so. I think his speed and athleticism can make a lot of sense there as sort of an attacking downhill linebacker. Like I said, and that's the thing is that I think off-ball linebacker is a position that isn't necessarily highly prioritized in the NFL. So you can spend big money there and kind of get away with it because, again, you have the extra money to spend. And if you want to really get a guy, you have to pay. You look at the guys like the Fred Warners and the Bobby Wagners of the world, they've always gotten paid throughout their careers because you realize, oh, there's so few guys who genuinely make a difference at this position.
Roquan Smith intercepted Mitch Trubisky this weekend, and my entire world just shit itself.
Yeah, that's an accurate portrayal of, yeah, it's fair.
It was a really funny thing that happened. But yeah, no, I do like the linebacker market is low key not bad. It's
there's going to be some guys coming out.
I also think that I'd love to see the Bears. You mentioned getting a corner. I like Jamel Dean a lot. I think he'd be a great pick.
Yeah, as far as linebackers, Drew Tranquill from the Chargers. I don't know if they'll get a deal done with him. I love Drew Tranquill. And that's the thing. There's going to be some good like mid to upper mid tier linebackers because not don't know disrespect, but the last few years of Danny Trevathan and Nick Kwiatkowski, they were good, they were decent, but they also walked out the door. So I think
and also Trevathan was really good his first year with the Bears, but then age started to catch up with him.
Right. I think they're really going to try to swoop in and get someone strong, or potentially go that position in the draft. Again, it would not surprise me. True. Oh, right. Okereke, who I loved coming out of Stanford. There's some really good players out in the market, and I think Bears fans may not be used to hearing, and the Bears are going to be in play for these high potential, high franchise player free agents because they haven't really been heavy spenders the last few years in free agency. But I think that this year it really will be different, and I think you're going to see. I don't think they're going to like completely blow all of their money, New Orleans Saints styles, but I think more of like what you look at the Bengals did when they went out in Super Bowl year and got DJ Reader and they got Trey Hendrickson and Chidobe Awuzie with like good, not top 5 market deals, but certainly top 10 market deals that made sense for the team as a whole.
Yes, you're saying like prioritizing low-key, solid moves of players who know how to play football, like sustainable moves of football players, not necessarily like stars at their positions, but enough to kind of, I feel like the one thing that the Bears have going for them is they kind of have their talent in place, like the stars, like kind of set. I kind of like what we obviously Justin Fields starts with him, the quarterback. I like Montgomery, good running back. Then you got Claypool and Mooney, who are under contract next year for sure. Good, solid receivers. Cole Kmet has been excellent this season.
Yeah, we've talked about that. Yeah.
And it's just, I do kind of like what the Bears have going. Honestly, the offense isn't nearly as much of a problem for the Bears as the defense, which is just so weird to say. But anyway, we do have a game this week, on Sunday, and obviously, it would be a lot more fun if both of our teams were good because then we could talk shit. But really, at this point, we're kind of rooting for the same thing. Although I'm hoping the game's a little bit closer than you're hoping for. What do you think's gonna happen? Like, how do you think this game's gonna look? Because I'll tell you my take, but I'll let you go into it first.
So the Eagles are playing really good football right now. That's
Yes.
just the way it is. I know everyone loves to talk about how they haven't played anybody. I in general don't love that argument because it's like you can only play who's on your schedule. I've never really bought into the argument to begin with. But if you look at the teams they've played, I believe 6 are currently playoff teams, and they've outscored them like by I think over 100 points. So when they are playing the good teams, they're beating them thoroughly. Let's not kid ourselves. The Giants are a pretty good football team. They were not 6-1 good. They were never that good. Anyone who thought they were actually that good, everyone knew it was a mirage. But the Giants were a good football team, and the Eagles smacked them last week. I mean, smacked them. I was lucky enough to be at that game, and even within the stadium, after that first touchdown, I was like, "Oh, okay, that's it." Like they're playing really good football. The Bears, like you said, they don't have a great defense. I do think that they've got good players that can make it difficult for the Eagles. I think Jalen Johnson versus AJ Brown is going to be a lot of fun to watch because Jalen Johnson is a bigger, thicker corner. He's like 6'1", like 205. He's a bigger, thicker guy with good ball skills. I could very much see it being a game where it's close early and it's like 14-13 at half. But then the Eagles pull away, but I do see the Eagles winning by at least 2 or 3 possessions.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking the same thing, and I think that the reason it'll be somewhat close is because I think the Bears offense will be able to have some sustainable drive.
I think they'll move the ball.
I think we'll move the ball.
What's good for the Bears, and what's good for the Bears is they can follow the same formula that Washington used to win and that Indianapolis almost used to win, which is run the ball, run the hell out of the ball, take time off the clock, limit the amount of times the Eagles offense gets the ball, and create a time turnover or 2. That's how you beat this Eagles team, is you keep the ball out of the offense's hand. And look at the Washington game. They were something like 15 of 18 on third down, some crazy percentage like that. That's the formula for beating this team.
Yes, and it's obviously easier said than done, but that's something that we've seen. Only once this year did it actually happen because obviously Washington got that one win, but we've seen some teams exploit the Eagles on the ground a little bit every here and there, even in losing efforts.
Back now, the signing of Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh. I'll be honest, when it happened, I was a little bit apprehensive. I was a bit like, what are we playing Madden? What are we doing Dream Team? Come on now. I was a little bit not sure of the move, but clearly it's worked. The numbers have gotten a lot better.
It's low risk, high reward.
It just, to me, it was a little bit I don't know how else to phrase it other than going out and sign. I thought we were maybe going out and signing names as opposed to players. I thought, I was worried about that, but they both look good. In their very first game, they combined for a sack together. And I took a video of it to my friend who's also a Bears fan, and I was like, oh yeah, I was wrong.
There's a reason why Suh didn't sign until November, and that is he wants to win. He was doing what Odell Beckham has been doing, except much, much quieter. And
it's weird to think of Ndamukong Suh and quiet in the same sentence, but absolutely.
Yes, and that's that's also I do think that's respectable of him, and that's something that I think we're going to see more of in the NFL. As the league continues to change, I just think that we're going to see a lot more.
Don't be surprised next year if you see it from Brandon Graham having a career year. Already has at least 6 sacks. He's coming back off of his Achilles. He looks phenomenal. I don't know if the Eagles pay him. I think he could get himself a bit. I could see him because I think he's 32 now, getting himself one last big contract, and that's one of the things I think is underrated. I think there's for the Eagles. I think there's a lot of pressure on the Eagles to win this year with the combination of how good they are playing and how bad the rest of the NFC looks this year. I think they're under a lot of pressure.
Oh yeah, no, that is the one thing is when you're as good as you are. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of pressure. It's definitely worth it. You want your team to be good, but at the same time, especially because, a lot of these guys on the Eagles aren't getting any younger. Although I do think I do trust Howie's ability to rebuild the team, on a whim. I do agree with you that, this is really the kind of not the end of the window for the Eagles, but it's closer. The Bears window's just about to open.
This to me is the Rams team from the Rams from that one, was it 2 years ago?
Last year.
No, right, it was last year. Where it was like, okay,
Yeah.
everything needs to come together this year because we just spent all this capital. It's going to start biting us next year, which they sort of did for the Rams this year. And there was a lot of pressure on them to win, and they did. Or the Bucks when they first got Brady. I think, and even when we look at this Eagles Super Bowl year, they got lucky in a lot of ways. They had a first round bye. If you go back to the Atlanta game in the divisional round, they're an end zone trip at the end of the red zone trip at the end of the way for losing that game. And then they get to play Minnesota and Case Keenum in the NFC title game. So at the end of the day, there's never been an unlucky Super Bowl team. Every Super Bowl team has some amount of luck, whether that's scheduling, whether that's health, whatever, what's the combination of the two. But I think there's a lot of
1 yard line.
Absolutely.
Stars aligning, right? Like you just kind of have,
100%.
For lack of a better term, yes, you got to have the best team, but also at the same time, you gotta get a little lucky. You gotta have the stars align. You gotta have a tuck rule. You gotta have, something has to bounce.
Pat Mahomes 24-point comeback coming back from multiple touchdowns down against the Colts and the Texans in the same year. Like you gotta have that luck at some point.
It was 24-0 against the Texans that one time. Yeah, that's accurate. And that was the year they beat the Niners, who are on tonight. I have not been watching the game, but I'm going to give a score update real quick because I think that's important. Yeah, Niners are winning. Brock Purdy mania is still a thing. 14-3. Niners have the lead over Seattle.
Irrelevant.
Mr. Irrelevant, you know it. And that could be, I think that's going to be the NFC Championship, by the way, is Philadelphia, San Francisco. Do you want to speak to that?
I personally think that San Fran's the second best team in the NFC. I've been trying to figure out how to articulate this point. The Niners are Super Bowl contenders with all three of Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Brock Purdy. You can say that while also understanding that comes with a caveat of to varying levels and degrees of success. I think they had the best chance with Jimmy G. I still think he was best fit for this offense. Then it was a slight drop to Lance, then a big drop to Purdy. Yes, I think they still could win a Super Bowl with Purdy under center. I would say, to quantify it, I would say it was around 40% with Jimmy, 30 with Trey, but it's like 10 to 15 with Purdy. At a certain point, there's going to come a 3rd and 8 down 4 in the fourth quarter was going to have to make the play, and I don't know if he will. That being said, he's surrounded by talent. He's got arguably the best offensive mind in football outside of Kansas City, and so it wouldn't surprise me to see them get lucky and go on a run.
That's fair, and I do think, like they caught lightning in a bottle with Purdy for now, but like who knows? Like he was Mr. Irrelevant for a reason, right?
Right.
And he's still a rookie, so I do think it will be challenging for the Niners going forward.
And the more tape the more defenses are going to know how to play him. They're going to know what he likes to do on those key downs, those 3rd and short. That's going to be a big thing too.
Oh, sure. No doubt about it. It'll help once, like Debo definitely avoided a serious injury.
Heineke made the playoffs with Washington a few years ago, so it's not like
Heineke. I think Heineke started in the playoffs for Washington.
I believe he did. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little different because that was that shit division.
Right.
Not that the NFC West is good this year, but Seattle's not a bad team, and the Rams did just win a Super Bowl, and the Cardinals will give you a fight for the most part.
Right. Murray tearing his ACL was big for them. I really think the division now is San Fran's to lose, and I don't think they will. And that's what I think was also, again, talk about pressure. The Eagles got to get that number 1 seed. If something happens and they kind of backdoor their way in to the playoffs and the 2 seed, I think that's going to be a rough go for them. I really don't think you want to play the extra game, particularly if it ends up being against a division opponent like Dallas in the wild card. Because Dallas, I also think, as much as I hate to admit it, this Dallas team can beat the Eagles. I don't think the Eagles are a better team. I don't think it's a huge gap, and I think this Cowboys team absolutely causes a lot of matchup problems for Philly.
No, there's no doubt about that. Dallas is good. I mean, they had a bad game last week, but they're a good team this year.
Sure.
And I do think that they are a threat. I think Washington, I don't think they're going to beat y'all, but I do think they can make a deep run because of that pass rush.
Right. And, it's interesting because going back to the Bears, to the point about the Bears, you look at the teams that are built to beat the Eagles. Again, it's running the ball. It's taking the ball away. It's keeping them off the field. And I think that's what you're going to see the Bears as a whole be built on next year. I think you're going to see players added into that interior of the defense to stop the run. So I think they've had problems there. I really, when you look at the Bears, and it just made my brain think of it. The guys they have there, it does have a little bit of a feel to Philly. I think Cole Kmet has gotten loads better this year. The stats aren't significantly different, but I think he looks like a much better player. And I think he can be a big part of Justin's progression as a quarterback. When we talked earlier about, learning to take that check down, it's great when Justin, gets out of the pocket and he's launching downfield 4 yards to Darnell Mooney, but it's also going to be good when he gets it to him on the rollout for those 8 yards.
Right.
And you look at it, Chase Claypool and AJ Brown, not the same, but sort of similar skill sets. I don't Darnell Mooney and Devontae Smith, similar skill sets as a downfield.
It does feel like that is kind of the trend of the NFL. Look at the Seahawks: DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett.
Right,
complementary,
absolutely.
Big guy, little guy. Who's going to have the big game this week? It just kind of depends on the personnel, and that's why I think that we talk about number one receivers all the time. I think it's more important to prioritize having an elite receiving tandem than having a true number one receiver.
I agree.
What's your take on that?
I agree. I think particularly when they have so I think around the league, it falls into one of two categories: parallel and perpendicular skill sets. You look somewhere like Miami, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are parallel skill sets. They are both speed threats, take the top off the defense, and the logic is, well, you can't put a safety over top to both of them every play because it's just not practical. It can't really work. It's just not going to. That's the logic there. Then you look at teams with perpendicular guys where one does one thing and one does the other. Like you said, in Seattle with Lockett and DK, they're trying to get it working down in Carolina with DJ Moore and Terrence Marshall. You look at the Jets, someone like Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore.
Sure.
And I think that's what the NFL has gone more and more to, is creating conflict, whether that's RPO, whether that's moving more and more towards RPOs, which put linebackers in conflict and trying to create mismatches, whether that's with the skill set of your players and saying, okay, if you want to stop his speed by committing a safety over top, then this guy's size is going to win over the middle. Or, okay, if you want to give him a linebacker to take away that quick slant, my outside guy's going to run a go. Like that sort of stuff to create conflict with it for defenses. And I think the Bears have the players in place to create a lot of conflict.
Yes, and I agree with that. I will say, a little bit of depth wouldn't hurt. Although, one thing, N'Keal Harry has been really good in his short little bursts of playing time, which is nice to see. I'm hoping the Bears keep him around next season because Justin Fields even said in his last interview that Harry is by far the best jump ball getter that the Bears have right now, which I think is I think that says more about Harry than it does about the ineptitude of the Bears offense, because Harry was a first round pick.
Right.
So I'm just hoping he finds it.
Got that body size to naturally be a jump ball catcher. And, it is a little bit hard, especially seeing what the Patriots are now doing this year on offense, to blame a Patriots receiver for not having good numbers early in his career. It's kind of hard to go, oh, how dare he? Like, yeah, I kind of get why.
Right. And but until then, this team is gonna struggle, and that's why just going back to the game on Sunday, when I don't know, you ever have your dog get the zoomies and you have to just physically restrain him, and he's just trying to wiggle around, and you're like, dude, come on, not right now. We have company here. I feel like, and you're just kind of petting him, and it's kind of nice, but it's also there's really no way he can escape. Because you're much bigger than he is. I feel like that's what the Eagles' offensive line is going to do to the Bears' defensive line.
That's probably an accurate portrayal. The line's playing
the reality
right now. They're healthy, which is a big thing. Lane Johnson should be playing. He has an abdominal injury, but I imagine he'll be going. I do think it's going to be a little bit of a little pancake breakfast. I do think we're going to get just a little bit of pancakes, which is a bit of extra syrup.
Look, I can't even be mad because to me, they don't feel like Chicago Bears. They feel like cosplayers pretending to be the Bears. Al-Qadim Muhammad, I'm picturing the film room meeting for the Eagles this week where you got Lane Johnson in there and the coach you mentioned is just all right, Chicago, here's what's going to happen. Or all right, Lane Johnson, this week your matchup is Al-Qadim Muhammad. I could just picture Lane Johnson either just laughing or like walking out of the meeting like why do I even need to do this?
Remember that
Al-Qadim Muhammad might be the worst football player I've seen in a long time.
Remember that scene from The Blind Side where Michael Oher just drives a guy like 80 yards into the stand?
Yeah.
Like,
the ref throws a flag and he's like excessive blocking. I don't know.
Yeah,
like,
it's terrible. Looks like that's my boy. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we're gonna get a couple of those moments from Lane and our Michael Oher, who I mean, again, Jordan Mailata, I think it truly is incredible. Again, how Coach Allen took a 7th round rugby player and turned him into a top 10 left tackle. That is
amazing. That is pretty amazing. Speaking of rugby, that play that your punter almost made last week against look, like y'all beat the Giants by 26 points. It should have been more, but y'all had a punt block, and then you also like gave up some garbage time points.
Right.
So
it was a blowout.
You didn't get to see it as well as it was on TV, but basically the punt was blocked. Your punter, who I guess used to play Aussie rules,
right,
picked up the ball with one hand as he was going, and he almost got that first down, but he stepped out of bounds. That would have been pretty sick.
He also blew out his knee in the process and had to get carted off the field. And the Eagles now have a new punter, who, by the way, is the former Tennessee punter who got cut. That also went into the GM getting fired. That's just some inside football connecting dots that makes my brain happy. But no, that was a very fun play. I think that's also, you don't want to overstate it. The Eagles have had some rough special teams moments this year. The punt return is starting to look a bit better, but they've given up some big returns. They've had a few muffs. That it would not shock me to have a big special teams moment be the key of an Eagle game at some point this season. That wouldn't shock me.
The good thing is you still have a little leeway. I think you still can afford one loss before it gets a little concerning. But
I think they will have. I think they will have one.
Sure.
I think either the Cowboys or the Redskins. I wouldn't be or the Commanders. Excuse me.
How dare you?
I know I'm the worst.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't surprise me to see either of them clip them. They have some rough matchups down the stretch. Also, you look at the late season games. They're already locked up the 1 seed. Don't get me wrong. I'm very excited for this team. Say Minshew. I like this team. There's also no denying that there are ways to beat them, and I think the book on how to beat them is a little bit out.
Right. And I think that's fair. And I still think, it is nice that the Eagles have a little bit of leverage where they could try a couple things out, like see what works. They can afford to rest some guys down the stretch. Like the Eagles are definitely sitting, they're in good shape right now, I will say.
Right. And to answer the question on Minshew,
yes.
I think Gardner Minshew is one of the better backups in the NFL. I look around the league and I go, oh, Gardner Minshew is a better player than a lot of the starters in the NFL. I think he's a starting NFL quarterback. You think about last year, he did win a couple of games when Jalen was out. Could he win with? Sure. I mean, Nick Foles won as a backup a couple years ago. That being said, I really don't want to take away from how good Jalen is playing and how much he has jumped. So everyone talks about, oh, well, now he's got Adrian, he's got Demonte. I'm not denying he's got all those players, but also when you look at the throws he is making, these are pinpoint precision throws that are 40-yard deep balls on the absolute money to the outside shoulder. That
also like understanding concepts, nicking off safeties.
Yeah, I mean,
there's the one play from the Colts game I sent. We talked, a little bit.
Play. Yeah,
and we talked a little bit. I was going over some film and I was just like sending you stuff over Facebook Messenger, just like, what exactly was he doing here? What was this here? What was it? And, you were kind of explaining it well. And it's just like, it just seems like he has such a great grasp on that offense. And you could put in a lot of mid-level quarterbacks and the Eagles will still be able to find ways to win because they are talented on offense. And at the same time, Jalen Hurts is a really, really good quarterback. And that's why you have a team that's not only 12-1, but also I think has also a team that I think has the number 1 point differential right now.
Correct.
Which speaks volumes. The point differential is so important. People ignore it, but it's like
so underrated. Because I remember
that says that's how many points on average you are better than the rest of the NFL on average. If you have a plus 150 point differential, that means you've had that many more successful drives, that many more turnovers, that many more, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's just a very underrated stat in general.
No, we talked about it. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago when Minnesota was still only a game back of the Eagles. And I said, Minnesota has a negative point differential this year. They've had things break their way very well. And again, the Eagles point differential against playoff teams has been very, very, very good. Their third quarter scoring, which I think third quarter scoring to me is massive. It's a barometer of what adjustments did you make at halftime, and then what adjustments to their adjustments did you make? Their third quarter scoring, I believe they're first in the league right now. Then they're still relatively healthy. The safety position is a little wobbly as of right now. It was their thinnest position going into the season. You've now got Gardner Johnson out. They had a impressive rookie who now hurt his knee, and he's week to week. So I do worry about, they've been really, really good about not giving up the big play this year. And if you look at the defense last year, schematically, they're doing more or less the same thing. They're mixing it up a bit more with their pressure looks as far as who's coming from where. But on the back end, the secondary, they're running the same schemes they did last year. They're just frankly better at doing it. They now have the talent to do what they want to do. Because the whole idea is to keep the ball in front of you and make plays when you can. And if you look last year, it was a lot of guys who, on that first down, when you're running cover 2 and they're throwing that flat route, they were giving that up 6-8 yards instead of getting up earlier and making it 2-3. And I think that's been the biggest difference for the defense this year. And obviously James Bradbury playing out of his mind.
Yes. Yeah. James Bradbury has been an absolutely great addition to that, opposite
Incredible.
Darius Slay, the corner position. I do think, people like to say you are what your record says you are. I don't, and more or less that could be true, but also remember, like, part of being a football team is you improve as the season goes on. It's not like you're done practicing in the middle of the season. You're still practicing every week. You're still getting better. So, like, you're not necessarily what your record says you are. Like, the Lions are 6-7, but they're a pretty good team. What up, Anthony? How you doing, man? Welcome to the show. Glad you're here. Anthony's a frequent commenter. He's great.
Very cool.
But yeah, I'm just saying, like, yes, and the Bears, they are what their record says. We're absolutely what are we, 3-9, 3-11, 3-10? I don't know. 3 wins and a lot of losses. Yeah, the Bears, that's what the Bears are paying for. That's what the Bears are getting. I do think at the same time, the Eagles have a great point differential. They're 12-1. Sure. Yeah. They are what that record says. But then again, you have teams like the Lions who are 6-7, but they've very clearly gotten better as the season has gone on.
Exactly.
Same with Washington. They might not necessarily, they might be a little better than the record, or maybe even a little
worse.
Or
look at the Giants. If you look at the Giants now, you think, oh, they're a good team. No, the Giants at one point were 6-1, and some people were talking about how they were a playoff contender.
Right. No, I think the Giants are a great example of someone who is definitely worse than what their record says they are.
Or like Vegas. Vegas is a much better team than their record is. They have found every way to lose a football game this year.
They've honestly, their impressiveness when it comes to losing rivals the Bears. That game
between the Bears, the Chargers, and the Raiders, it's just like the holy trinity of finding ways to lose.
I'd call it a holy quadrant because of this team right here.
Sure.
These guys have been very creative. The Minnesota Vikings over the years, just finding new ways every week to lose. The Chargers, they still can make the playoffs. I was at the game, the Miami game. I got to see one of the coolest plays I've ever seen in my life, where running back fumbled, the ball went a little bit, trickled into the backfield. Tyreek Hill picked it up, and the second he picked it up, we knew he was gone.
It's one of those things that you only see happen in Madden that like you never do, but you've seen it from somebody else's like YouTube account.
It works every time. Your brother who's never played before, or like your roommate who's like, oh, let me try this out. It works whenever they do it, but whenever you do it, it's like, no, not going to happen.
No.
But yeah, that was a fun game. We'll say. Wait, say that again.
No, that was a crazy play. We both got crazy plays. That the Devontae Smith touchdown was one of the crazier touchdowns. It's funny because everyone's talking about 8-10 years ago on that throw to Devontae Smith touchdown. He's dying. Like he's getting lit up by that safety. But I don't hate that. I like where the league's going. But another thing I found interesting about the Bears that I was thinking about earlier.
It's not like safeties can't hit. Safeties can hit. Like
right, you just know how to hit.
You just got to know how to do it.
Right.
I mean, Matt Milano of the Bills, the linebacker,
murdering Mike White.
Matt Milano, the linebacker for Buffalo, gave, and you should go back and watch these highlights, Noah. He gave a textbook example on how to hurt a quarterback without doing anything that's against the rules and without doing anything that's like egregious. Very clean, solid goring of the player.
No, yeah, he threw a Bill Goldberg spear at him. Like it.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that's totally legal. And that was so refreshing to see that, like, we still have a physical, violent game, even though those kinds of hits are getting penalized every now and then. It's like there are still they're proving that there are clean ways to hit, and I think that's
Well, it's
refreshing.
funny because it used to sort we talk all the time now about keeping a quarterback's legs clean because we've seen quarterbacks, hurt their knees and go down. It used to be the exact opposite where quarterbacks would say, hey, you know what? It's like wrap me up around my legs and bring me down. Don't hit me in the ribs because then I can't throw the ball and then I got to wear all this padding.
Sure.
It's interesting how we prioritized, what injuries to protect and which ones not to protect. Or you think about, there have been significant chest and rib injuries for quarterbacks in the past. I think Mike White nearly punctured a lung they were worried about.
Jesus.
But give credit to, like I said, Matt Milano. It's important to be able to lay the wood and do it cleanly. That being said, I think we also saw the Jalen Phillips sacks, and what really just killed me this year. An NFL spokesperson, I can't remember who it was off the top of my head, put out a memo saying, because somebody asked him, like, oh, like, are you going to make like pass interference reviewable? Because, you guys have been absolutely botching it with roughing the passer. And his response is, oh, well, we're thinking about that. But, most of the calls this year have been correct. And it's like, don't lie to our faces as fans.
That's bullshit. Look, like at least admit that you're full of shit, right?
Right.
Like
at least say, oh, well, there have been some rough calls this year and we're going to do what we can. But okay, fine, sure. Don't say, oh, we think Moses' calls have been right. No, stop it. Come on.
Yeah, like, come on. Give me a break. Like, my God, the Bears have been hosed more times than I can count, but it's not just the Bears. Like,
right.
Getting hosed has been a very common thing in the NFL.
And you think about the 1 year where they where they had pass interference allowed to be reviewed, there were plenty of cases where we all went, oh no, the call was wrong, and then the refs went, no, we're sticking by it because
they stuck by it every time. It happened the first game of the season. Mitch Trubisky rolls out.
I remember,
made this unbelievable like Eli Manning type escape and threw it downfield. Taylor Gabriel made a great catch, but like he did a little like his hands were on the defensive player. Yeah. The defensive player clearly like did a Steph Curry flop forward.
I remember they're like, oh my God, here we go.
Right. But they called the flag and the Bears didn't review, or they did review it, I think, and they called it, they went with the call on the field, even though it was pretty clearly not pass interference. And I guess they were reviewing pass interference, but they weren't taking it seriously. Let's see what Anthony says. Anthony here says, I don't believe in today's game that you could lay the wood cleanly without getting a roughing call. That's fair. I've definitely seen instances where like you get a good clean hit on a guy and they call the flag. However, Anthony, I encourage you to go back, watch highlights from that Jets-Bills game, because Matt Milano had two very, very good hits on Mike White that they did not call a flag, and he got him out of the game, and ask Ray Lewis, ask any defensive player, your goal isn't to injure someone, but you want to rough them up. You want to rattle them. And like, if you happen to take him out of the game, that's just kind of a latent function of the job sometimes.
Right.
And that's what the Bills were kind of able to do. And Matt Milano, like, my God, like Matt Milano's become one of my new favorite players. I've always liked him, but like last week, that really, kind of set the tone for me in regard to what a linebacker should be able to
do. I would also say in regard to laying the wood on a quarterback, maybe not necessarily sacks per se, but I think if you watch some of the hits that Justin takes, that Josh Allen takes, that Herbert will take, when these quarterbacks, I do give the league, this is where I will give them credit, the league has been, I think, overall better towards defenses of, hey, if you're going to run the ball and you're going to initiate your slide 0.1 yards before your defender's going to get there, we're going to allow them to put a hit on you. Or we're going to, you got to get yourself down, which I think is going to be big for Justin moving forward. I don't think it's impossible to lay the wood now. It's difficult, and you have to figure out how to do it. That backside blind rush from the backside where you kill a guy in the back of the head, yeah, those days are gone. But now, again, you're focusing on the back, focusing on the ribs, focusing on the shoulders.
The ribs are fair game. Hit them in the ribs. And get bruised ribs fucking suck.
Ribs ruin everything. I remember when I was a lineman in high school, one of the first things I was ever taught was that if early in a game you're playing the line and the guy who's blocking you or the guy that you're blocking just isn't really cooperating, just kind of playing dirty, doing whatever you got to do, you just take the palm of your hand and you just come right into the ribs instead of coming up into the chest the way you normally would. Just right into the ribs, right below the padding. It'll slow them down. Believe me. It'll make me go, hey, knock it off. Watch what you're doing. Come on.
Honestly, yeah, no, that's like it's one of those things where it's similar to when they say, if a defensive pass rusher puts their hands up, just cup check them, right? You don't want to block you passes.
If a defender leaves their feet, you bury them. There's football is always going to be a violent physical game. It's the way it's designed. So when people talk about taking the physicality out of football, I don't know if they're trying to take the physicality out of it. It is absolutely true. Some of the violence they're trying to take out of football, but I don't hate that. I remember the uproar when they got rid of the wedge on kickoffs, 10, 15 years ago.
Oh yeah. Well,
And
I was mad about that because that was a rule against Devin Hester.
fair, sure. It
Right.
made things harder for him. But
Yeah.
taking the physicality out of it, and it was fine. And looking back on it now, when you talk to those same players who are furious about it, now they go, "Yeah, I can't believe we were allowed to have a wedge to begin with."
It's so
Right? You
funny.
know what I mean?
It's like Red Rover, except the whole team's coming at you at once, and they're all 350 pounds.
Right. Or if you look, there was a penalty that got called by a defender who almost murdered Lane Johnson's leg. Because now the rule is, if you're a defender and you can't just go down and murder an offensive lineman's legs to create a play, like you can't do that anymore. So I think they're trying to take some of the violence and the unnecessary physicality out of the game. But I would think physical football is just as relevant as ever.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, and I also think I'm just thinking about those wedge plays, and it's like I did like them because I like watching a bunch of grown men holding hands running down the field because it was kind of funny.
Yeah, and then there's no little how long. No, but it was such a violent. Because I did it. Some of the most violent stuff you'll ever do. But no, I do think, can you lay the wood the same way you could 20 or 30 years ago? No, I also don't think that's a bad thing necessarily.
Right, right, and it's just challenging defensive players to be more creative. My big problem is when they call shit even though it is clean. That's my issue.
That's why I'm in favor of a review where they go, "Oh, initially that looked really bad. We went back on it and realized, no, he hit him in the chest and throat and didn't get up into the neck and the face mask. It just looked that way. And now we look at it." Or even the inverse, where you look at, the Dallas Goedert injury, for example, where a face mask very clearly occurs and a defense and a ref misses it. I'm always maximum pro review. Everything that can be reviewed, in my opinion, should be able to be reviewed, but you have to then use the tools properly. Give the refs as many tools as possible, but then use the tools in the tool belt.
Right. It's one of those things where it's like, for me, I'm always on the fence of either everything should be reviewed or nothing should be reviewed.
Right.
Yeah. And I want them to get calls right, so everything should be reviewed, and it just shouldn't take as long as it does, because I feel like
today's replay technology is so good and so accurate. Like, it's hard for the league to not review things when we know they can. Also,
one thing they've done a good job of this year, I will say, is they've overturned some touchdowns like on the fly.
Yeah.
Like, just by looking at the big screen, and I think that's kind of cool. That's kind of smart.
The one thing I will say,
they've done a good job of getting the call right before anyone challenges it or anything like that. And I think that's kind of cool. I think that's just a good improvement by the league. That's one thing.
The one thing I'll say, we got to figure out a better system for first down measurements than two dudes holding poles. And then this hyper precise measurement where we're talking about millimeters between first and down, and they're just running out onto the field. We've got laser. We have lasers. Lasers are a thing. There needs to be a better system than the first down markers.
I get it. But I like the first down markers. I think it's funny. It's like 31 teams don't have my heart. Well, no, 30 teams don't have my heart. The Packers have my heart in a very bad, negative way. But look, when 30 teams are playing, I'm more. I mean, obviously, I have rooting interest, but most of the time, a first down, to a fan who's a fan of a team that's not. Most fans who are watching a game don't have a specific rooting interest, and I think that we kind of like the chain gang. I think that we think the chain gang is kind of funny. But that being said, when it does affect your team, that's when it does suck. Also, I think that there's a certain drama element that the chain gang brings to football.
Right.
Is it going to stretch far enough? Is it going to stretch far enough? It's just kind of an underrated thing.
That's fair. It just, or I always think back to the Jadeveon Clowney, South Carolina, Michigan play where it's just he sure. But something I'm interested in because as someone who's watched the Bears a lot, obviously in the past few years they've made the decision to invest highly in day 1 and 2 picks in their secondary, as opposed to things like the offensive line, like receiver. and they've gotten good players out of that. Looking back on it now, though, would you still take those players, or would you say, "Damn, we could have really used an extra lineman or a weapon for for Justin"? Or you'd say, "No, these have all been good players. You don't go back and not take good players in drafts."
Those are good. Those are good questions. So you're saying like, are you saying like Cole Kmet, Jalen Johnson, Darnell Mooney?
Right. So, and then you talk about, Kyler Gordon, Jaquan Brisker, Jalen Johnson. I would say those three picks specifically of Brisker, Johnson, and Kyler Gordon. Looking back on them, yes, they have all turned out to be good players, but they were high draft picks at what could potentially be considered maybe non-premium positions, or lower on the totem pole in position of need. Looking back on it, saying, "Oh no, these are all still three good players," or would you go back and swap? Let's just say, for example, Jaquan Brisker for like Landon Dickerson, for example. If you could make that trade today, would you do it?
I would not make that trade, and the reason, and it's unfortunate because it just so happened that Brisker and Gordon got concussed the same week, which
Right.
like, that just sucks. Like
that is unfortunate. That blows.
Right, and you did not like the Landon Dickerson pick. I am a Landon Dickerson fan. I liked him at Alabama.
I was wrong about that for sure.
Yes, and by the way, just to be clear, Noah's right about so many things. Like he's had some very successful analyses in the draft. What was the specific? There was one specific thing you got like crazy right. I can't remember who it was.
This year, Tariq Woolen. If you go back and listen on one of the
no, it wasn't Woolen. It was someone that's like, it was like one of those, like I think it might have been one of those Madden darlings. I can't remember. I can't remember. It was someone. There's someone. I think it was like 2 years ago or so.
I remember now because I always have a guy like day three. I'm like, oh, this day three guy is going to be a good player and he's going to produce right away.
Right. There was someone that you absolutely nailed, and I can't remember who it was, but I think you did say Jalen Johnson was a quality pick. Like I
love Jalen. I think he went like 2 or 3 spots before the Eagles, and I was like, I was really hoping he would fall to it. I loved him coming out of Utah. I thought he might even transition to safety coming out, but he's converted to a really good player.
And just so you know, to answer your question, kind of similar to what Anthony says here, our secondary is almost set, missing another corner, and that corner is Jamel Dean, I believe. I don't think Tampa's going to be able to afford him, but I do think, I would not trade. I would not make these trades because, like I said, the offense hasn't been as much of a problem for the Bears as Bears fans think it has been. Early in the season, definitely struggled a lot. But in recent weeks, like since the Patriots game, they've really been like they've been able to move the ball, not at a great level all the time, but like they haven't been embarrassing. They've been like a pretty mid-tier offense,
and they're
for the
more
most part.
Schematically diverse than they were earlier in the season.
For sure. Like they've been able to kind of expand on what they've been doing. They've been able to move the ball downfield. And the one thing is, I do think they could get better in the red zone, but that's just a matter of like reps with Justin and Kmet and Claypool.
Right. And that's reps, right? That's knowing where to put the ball. That's knowing how the guy cuts on the inside.
Sure. So to answer your question, like, no, I am content with the way the Bears last draft went. It's just unfortunate that the 2 guys got concussed. I don't know if Velus Jones was a great pick, but I still think he could be really good. He's got some really good speed. You saw him play. You don't like Tennessee, but you saw him play at Tennessee. You saw
he caused plenty of Florida. Yeah. And I liked, and give credit's due. Everyone talked about how horrendous the Bears receiving core was going to be, but Equanimeous St. Brown has made a couple of plays this year. Even Byron Pingles has gotten some good reps. So I think that the Bears receivers going into the season, we talked about how it was going to be the worst receiving room in the NFL, and it ended up being not.
Well, getting Claypool helped
here. But I would say they're more in the 20 to 25 range as opposed to 25 to 30.
Right. And I do think that like they could like Mooney and Claypool have the talent along with N'Keal Harry, and if they're able to pick up some guys, I'm in the favor of getting like veterans. Like get me a Jarvis Landry,
right?
And someone who what'd you say?
It wouldn't surprise me if Mooney or Claypool or even both ended up being 1,000-yard receivers. They both have that ability.
Exactly. And
that's why I think already has been.
Especially with another year of maturity for Justin, I think that it could definitely be like top 15, maybe top 10.
Mooney already has a 1,000-yard year,
top 10 receiving core in the league, like at least for a couple, like for a season or two, because the Mooney and Claypool will both be playing for contracts, and you got Harry, who's got a ton of potential still and has shown flashes this year. We'll kind of see how it goes. But I do think that like the weapons are nice. They are
Yeah.
in place. The one thing I will say is, get me an offensive tackle now, and
No.
like an offensive tackle and a center would be nice. And I do think Leatherwood, like he was pretty good against Green Bay. I do think he could, he's another one of those first round guys.
You never know. Yeah.
He's very similar to N'Keal Harry in that sense.
Sure.
But yeah. Anyhow, so let's see. One sec. You believe that our number one receiver is playing on Saturdays? See, I disagree with that fundamentally. The reason, and I think maybe in the future, but like the reason why I disagree with that is because I think the best way to help a young quarterback is by giving him weapons who are battle tested in the NFL, not necessarily young guys. That's kind of like the AJ Brown thing to help Jalen Hurts. Of course, Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith built up chemistry in Alabama together. Now, Smith is a young guy, but AJ Brown is that veteran presence.
Right.
Yes, I'm not saying Jarvis Landry is going to be the Bears' number one option. I'm saying the Bears have a young receiving room, and they could benefit from having a guy who has played as many snaps in the NFL as a Jarvis Landry, as like a Jameson Crowder, or like just like these guys. I'm not expecting I'm not even expecting 30 receptions from some of these guys. I'm saying I want Justin Jefferson is great, but Kirk Cousins is a veteran quarterback, right?
Sure.
So rookie quarterbacks tend to do, or young receivers often come to teams with older veteran quarterbacks, and that's what they kind of bring the best out of each other.
I don't think
Cousins, I don't know how good Justin Jefferson would be if he was with with most young quarterbacks, with the exception of like a Herbert or a Joe Burrow. I don't know how much better he would be with Trevor Lawrence like earlier in this year, or Zach Wilson, or I don't even know how. Like, I think he'd be good with Fields, but also I do think Jefferson is one of those rare examples. But at the same time, I'm just saying the main thing you want to do is, if you got a young quarterback, you got to get veteran receiver presences if you're going to have young receivers too. And then if you're going to have an older quarterback, you want to get the young guys. That's when you want to get the young bloods in there. That being said, I mean, you want a good balance of both, right? And right now the Bears are just very youthful, and that's why I'm saying, we gotta get some aging guys in there, cheap deals. It's worth it.
I don't think the Bears' number one receiver is playing Saturdays right now. I think a Bears complementary receiver is certainly playing on Saturdays right now. I think a Bears
agreed
third round pick to come in and be a playmaking specialist next year is playing on Saturdays right now. I don't think the first I don't see a receiver who they could end up using that top 10 pick on. Coming into the year, we thought maybe it could be Jackson Smith-Njigba. We thought maybe a Keyshawn Boutte, but season just didn't work out that way. I think next year potentially, and that's another thing. Speaking of the draft this year, that is just a point I just want to make for those who maybe haven't thought about it this way. I don't think the quarterback class this year is actually as good as like it's being made out to be. I think that's a product of just how horrendously terrible the quarterback class was last year. I don't particularly see any of the four quarterbacks of Stroud, Bryce Young, Levis, or Richardson. I would not feel comfortable taking any of them before the 10th pick, and I wouldn't want to take Levis or Richardson in the first round. That's what I fully believe. I just don't think that Stroud or that Young are true like top 5 quarterback picks. I just don't see it.
And to answer your question, Anthony, yes, I know Justin Jefferson is a special talent. However, talent is one thing. You could have the most talented receiver. You got to have chemistry. The big thing is building chemistry at the NFL level. And that's something that Justin Fields is still improving at. Like, he's still learning how to build chemistry with certain receivers. I'm sure he and Justin Jefferson would be awesome together. Like that. Oh my God. Are you kidding? I would love that. However, first of all, it's hypothetical. And secondly, I mean, it's like I'm not saying Kirk Cousins is a better quarterback than Justin Fields, because he's not. He's more experienced at building chemistry. And football,
I think it's also okay that Kirk Cousins is a better quarterback than Justin Fields today.
At this point, sure, fair.
It's also okay. It's also okay if that's your opinion. That's okay to say.
Well, I mean, I'm also like, it is a Bears podcast, so I'm careful about what I say. But but look, I mean, Cousins is, he has more experience. I think long term, Fields is surely going to be better than Cousins. Although Cousins is, I think, very underrated. Sorry if you're a Vikings hater, but that's just kind of the
No,
reality.
and another thing on Justin that I don't think gets talked about a lot. There are certain things that are going to carry him. Like talk about the accuracy issues. He also has an absolute monster of a cannon on his arm. Like he can launch it. So yeah,
Anthony, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. I'm sorry. Like he's gonna be the best QB in the North. Not yet though. Anyway, Noah, continue what you're saying.
Yeah, no, that's fair. He's definitely, I think it's inarguable he'll be the best quarterback within 2 to 3 years. But like, yeah, you're gonna get frustrated when he misses those, 2nd and 8, 6-yard out routes with the off cover. It's frustrating. But then when he's able to dial up those 45, 50-yard bombs downfield, like that's why you take that though. Like it's very difficult to ask a quarterback, hey, you need to both have the accuracy to make these touch throws and hit these long balls and do both of those at an efficient and timely level. It's just hard to ask that of a quarterback. It just is.
It absolutely is, and especially a young quarterback. And that's the one thing I will say, like the reason why I'm so confident in Justin Fields and why I hold him to such a high standard is because first of all, he's earned high expectations, by showing really good flashes. And secondly, I mean, he's got the talent. He's absolutely got the talent to do it. And I just think, it's one of those things where people forget how hard it is to play quarterback at the NFL level. And I guess, he'll get there. He's going to get there.
I would also say how hard it is to play quarterback for the Chicago Bears. It's not just from an outside perspective. It's a fan base that's not terribly forgiving of the team as a whole and the quarterbacks, almost very similar to Eagle fans in that way.
Right. No, it takes one to know one, right?
Right. No, exactly. Trust me. I am not speaking from some like moralistic fan base.
I know. There's no moral high ground here. I believe me. Well established. I get it.
And so and also another big thing is I think sort of similar to Jalen, Justin is able to take it on the chin and be the quarterback for the Chicago Bears. Unlike, for example, Zach Wilson crumbled clearly under the pressure of being the New York Jets quarterback. Clearly, he crumbled on the right. Justin, to me, does not seem like someone who crumbles. That just doesn't. He'll throw.
That's the thing. That's the other thing I was going to say, and I kind of stumbled over these words a bit. But what I really meant to say is the real reason why Justin Fields has all the green flags in the world right now is because improvement.
Yeah.
Clear, definitive, demonstrative improvement. Yep. He has improved significantly from this year and last year, and he has improved significantly like every month this season, like week after week, one could argue. Right. And like there's specific instances of specific things that I notice he does better this year than last year. There's one play, a third down against the Vikings earlier this season, where he saw the blitz coming from a certain side. He took the snap and immediately threw it like exactly where you're supposed to, right to commit, picked up the first down. And, that's just one example of one play, obviously, but it's just like these little things that I'm noticing every year or like every month that he's getting better at. And that is why I know he's going to be the best quarterback in the North very soon, because like he's improving and I don't expect it to plateau. I really don't, because if he's already shown he can get better, why can't he be even better than better, if that makes sense?
Right. I don't think we'll have like a Jalen Hurts level jump next year, because Jalen jumped, I think, way more than anybody expected.
Well, not me. You know me. I was always on the hype train.
I think a large jump into the top 15, top 10 discussion is certainly possible.
No doubt. Top 10, top 10 in top 15, top 10 in the league. And then I would say, the thing is, Goff has been very good. Like, the thing is, there are good quarterbacks in the NFC North. Cousins is good. Goff is good. And Aaron Rodgers is a Hall of Famer.
Aaron Rodgers, right.
Right. And I don't know what Aaron Rodgers is going to do next season. But I don't see what, like, it's also hard to compare Fields to these other quarterbacks because what they bring to the table is so different. But I could see a scenario where Fields is, I can, if the Bears handle the offseason right, sure. I could see a scenario where he's the best in the North by next year. I don't know if that's what's going to happen, but I could see it.
If things come together, they make the moves they need to, they add players to the line.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And with that, we've been going for a little while now. I want to, wrap it up on a fun note. So I can't really think of anything. We were gonna do like a whole ranking thing, but it's just kind of it doesn't fit what we're doing. Um, I guess yeah. Can I get your Super Bowl pick? Your unbiased Super Bowl pick.
Unbiased Super Bowl pick. It is so hard for me as a fan to predict the Eagles' biggest Super Bowl, but just for sake of argument, I understand it's a popular pick right now, and as of right now, I do think they will make it. If if Brock Purdy plays well the rest of the year and plays the level he's playing, I do think San Fran is overall a better team. As of right now, I do think Eagles are Super Bowl favorites, as well they should be. I think Kansas City makes it. I think Pat Mahomes is just that good. I think the rest of the roster is underrated in their talent. So I think it would be Chiefs Eagles Super Bowl. I think it'd be a really fun game. I do think it would end up with the Chiefs win. I think the Eagles might just be 1 year away from
Andy
knowing
Reid
how to
Bowl.
really win as a team. Andy versus his former team. I do think it would be a higher scoring affair, something in the
Kelsey Bowl. Lots of good stories there.
Tons. I'd see it in like the 30-38, 41-38 type of score.
All right, I like it. And obviously, I would root for the Eagles with you because you're my friend. But like, I would definitely want the Eagles to win that game if it were to happen. You know what I'm kind of thinking? I definitely, I got the Eagles going. I think that no one in the NFC quite touches them at this point. My AFC pick might be a little more surprising.
Wow, that's interesting.
And my thing is, I think Joe Burrow is just him.
He might be him. I
think Joe Burrow's him. I'm sorry, he's just so good. And that's where I'm leaning right now. I could see a scenario where I'm leaning more towards the Bills or the Chiefs later this week. But like just watching some of what the Bengals have done recently, they're back. They're back.
Also,
they're back.
Burrow is 3-0 against Mahomes. That matters. That matters.
Absolutely matters. And I think he's 3-0 against Andy Reid, honestly. Like that's what I'm because Andy Reid, as an Eagles fan, he's not a perfect coach. He has this problem where he sucks with time management.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely a relevant downfall of the Chiefs football team. Although, my original pick for the season was Niners and Chargers. I can see the Niners going. Don't think the Chargers will go. But yeah, should be a lot of fun. I do think the Eagles will have an easier time in the NFC. I don't think the AFC. I think the AFC is a little bit more cluttered with a little bit more talent.
Definitely much more tightly contested in the AFC, yeah.
But, we'll see how things go. So with that, that about wraps things up. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Anthony, Frank, always appreciate your insight and feedback and whatnot. Next week, we're going to have a great episode recapping this game. And there's a good chance Noah Gross will make another appearance on this podcast. You got any last words, Noah Gross, before I end the show?
No, go Birds. This is the one thing I would say to the more negative Bears fans. Just give it a year. Just give it a year. And look for the good moments. I would say that's how I sort of got through the bad year from the Eagles a couple years ago, is you look for the good moments. So that would be my advice. Because I've had some Bears fans say, hey, you're just bluntly, your team is very good. We are not. How do I get through this? Look for the good moments. That would be my little tidbit of it. And that's my little tidbit of advice for y'all.
We appreciate that, Noah. And just so you know, everyone listening, Noah is, as far as Eagle fans go, he's definitely one of the better ones. Definitely. And I do love Philly fans in general. I think they're fun, kind of like we are. But like Noah's cool. So he's definitely a good friend of the show. And with that, I'm gonna let y'all tell me how full of crap I actually am.
I think I'm full of crap. I have to be just like some idiot who's full of crap. Please show up in the comments and tell me how I'm full of crap, because I genuinely want to know, because I have to be, right?